Hey, it's Flannel Boy, and if you're wondering about the location change, it's because I'm home for the holidays. And as somewhat of an early Christmas present to you guys and myself, I'm going to talk about something I like a lot and therefore have a lot to say about. So, are you ready, kids? I can't hear you! Ugh, SpongeBob, everyone. The internet has become increasingly more geared towards SpongeBob in recent years, with more memes and in-jokes being centered around the show than any other Nicktoon. And you can see why. The internet now caters to people the correct age to know SpongeBob very well. And now that I've inherited the internet at age 18, me and my fellow teenagers can celebrate the show for what it was. And lament it for what it's become. First, forgive my hipsterness. I know, that's a four-letter word in today's society. But I have to talk about aesthetic first. SpongeBob started out with low-budget animation, kinda like cartoons on Cartoon Network. They grew out of that kinda fast when it got popular. The music is Pacific Ukulele. Most shows, if they have music at all, are just reiterating the theme song throughout, or have that big Seth MacFarlane, Butch Hartman big band sound. They put in grotesque shots of the characters sometimes, just still frames. Now one thing they use barely ever, like maybe once a season, is romance as a plot driver. A show that can afford to do that has to make up for it with brilliant humor because it's so necessary for basically every adult show and most cartoons for kids too. But you know what? I like not relying on love. What's love but a second-hand emotion? I like a character who's an adult and isn't obsessed with some woman all the time. Because there's more to life than that. But no, if you're a male lead character without a female romantic lead that you're constantly chasing after, that means you're gay, doesn't it, America? Because there's no such thing as someone who's both straight and not obsessed constantly with girls. It's somewhat timeless in that the series isn't necessarily set in the 90s, 2000s, because nothing demonstrates any type of modern technology.
A rubber duck.
Well, except this.
We're not cavemen! We have technology!
And that computer's so dated it doesn't really matter anyway. And while I usually love it when they
insert random pop culture references into every single line,
it doesn't have to, because this show is so hilarious otherwise. Try to explain why SpongeBob is funny. Try. You can do it with other shows. The Rugrats are supposed to be funny because they have a poor grasp on real life at that stage. But it's difficult for SpongeBob because they use a variety of different jokes. Yeah, some work more than others, but there's no one-size-fits-all explanation for why a SpongeBob episode is funny. Sometimes a show piles all of its humor into the character traits of one idiot, like live-action sitcoms tend to do. That is not SpongeBob's way. Patrick is by far the funniest character with the best lines.
Once there was an ugly barnacle. He was so ugly that everyone died. The end. Who you calling Penny?
Is this the Krusty Krab?
No, this is Patrick. My name's not Rick! That's not disturbing. This is disturbing. Hi there, SpongeBob. My name is Patback.
But they do episodes without him pretty often, and pan over to Mr. Krabs or Squidward, each of which have hilarious chemistry with SpongeBob. Let's just take Patrick on his own without the rest of the characters who are also funny. Shows like to make characters that are funny or unusual for one reason. You can go foreign, or otherwise differently cultured, or perhaps fat or ugly. Usually stupid doesn't cut it, though. You need a certain type of stupid to be funny, not just making stupid situations for the hell of it, like The Hangover, or ugh. Now, they say that what humor is finding an alternative logic path to a situation than the normal, and Patrick is just full of that. Not only does he have a separate logic path than normal people, he's got a different one each time. A completely inconsistent worldview. One time, SpongeBob says Patrick's genius is showing, and Patrick is covering it up like he said, "Penis!" But later, he says,
"But don't genius live in a lamp?"
And after that, when Squidward's describing how Santa Claus breaks into people's houses to give them presents,
like a genie.
Most lazy writers who want an idiot character make someone who misunderstands common idioms like a child, but Patrick makes mistakes kids are too young to make and adults are too smart to make. Well, now that I've ruined Patrick for you, let's move on to wider appeal. The show is happy. Now, while the default for cartoons is usually the happy level of this Soundgarden music video, the 90s were full of shakeups. Cartoons for adults were just coming around, and darker, more realistic tones were available. Pop culture references were a lot more important, and a worldview that looked down on the US was common. The Simpsons started it, and then after that, Ren and Stimpy kicked Nick off, the Animaniacs were full of adult humor and pop culture, Beavis and Butthead got ridiculously big compared with their budget, The Critic was basically The Simpsons with Jon Lovitz, seriously, check out Duckman, Daria happened, South Park pushed the envelope off a cliff, CN had Dexter's Lab and Courage the Cowardly Dog, the list goes on. SpongeBob, being a show about an adult sponge, would usually fall into that category of cartoon. The only happy shows that Nick had made up to that point were kid-oriented, like Hey Arnold and Doug. The adult-charactered ones ended up like Cat Dog or Rocko's Modern Life, both of which had a lot of people who later worked on SpongeBob on them. And while I like the refreshing reality and grittiness, after 80s... Yes, 90s? I'm not the Pingers. 90s! Now get out! We're doing SpongeBob!
What was that?
I figured I have the clip, why not use it to censor stuff, eh? So while I might enjoy the grittiness a bit, you can see how SpongeBob was a product of its time. Grotesque at points in animation, about adults while being for kids, but a happy place to be, even though it's been nuked. A reactionary to dark times. I find it kind of ominous that they actually use Bikini Atoll explosion footage in the show. But if you aren't in on that, it's a standard happy universe that doesn't make the American system seem like some oppressive oligarchy or wasteland of creepy stuff. The SpongeBob, Squidward, Mr. Krabs dynamic runs the show more than anything. The moral, if there is one, is that optimism pays, that SpongeBob is happier with his life precisely because of his outlook, even though Mr. Krabs treats both him and Squidward awfully. Another thing that is a must for basically all Nicktoons is episodic form. Long-running serials usually don't crop up on this network, except Avatar, and their closest approximation is recurring characters. More or less, you have to end up where you started. So the date that SpongeBob jumped the shark is May 6, 2005, but we're gonna have to rewind a bit to see why. SpongeBob went on hiatus for a bit in the mid-2000s after the first 3 seasons because the staff was making a Spongebob Squarepants movie. And I don't think the movie was that bad on its own. The advertising was genius in not showing the audience anything that was going to be in the actual plot, except it did as it got closer to the release date. But they were played as short SpongeBob episodes in themselves. When making a movie for a show like SpongeBob, I'd like to suggest something in the realm of the Simpsons movie, although it hadn't come out yet. For episodic shows, you want a very high-stakes 2-hour episode as your movie. The Simpsons had the whole town in the balance, but they managed to make it all the way back to normal at the end. For SpongeBob, though, they changed a few things, and that was problematic. First of all, they changed Neptune, who was a character in the TV series before, into Jeffrey Tambor, while he was still on Arrested Development. Let me say that I love this character. I could just imagine this.
You don't understand! My crown is a symbol of my king-like authority! And, between you and me, my hair is thinning a bit.
But this had nothing in common with the show. Plankton never wanted to rule the world, just have a successful restaurant. It was easy to get to the surface in the show, but here it's an impossible journey. And the whole thing ends with Plankton getting thrown in jail after having found the secret formula. 2 things that drastically alter the characteristics of the show. Any subsequent episodes of the show with Plankton trying to get the Krabby Patty secret formula would be unnecessary, and he would be on the run from the law instead of hiding out in his restaurant. So this works more as a series ender than a mid-run movie. Unfortunately, on our given date, SpongeBob did return as a TV show that ignored the content of the movie completely. It also had completely different people running it, as Steven Hillenburg had left one of his posts. The animation got all bright and new age. Oh, my eyes! My eyes! The antics are stupidly predictable. Annoying Squidward is now just for the hell of it instead of a byproduct of what SpongeBob was doing before. And Patrick is no longer the idiot he once was. He's more apt to be obtuse to people's feelings or misunderstand an idiom. No longer does he ask why mayonnaise is an instrument or tell SpongeBob the story of an ugly barnacle or anything else completely nonsensical. Now his idiocy is predictable, and standard, and logical, even. The TV movies are terrible, even the one with David Bowie, who I swear I am only going to mention in a positive light from now on. There aren't any classic moments anymore, no more quotable scenes. In the early series, you could hear the funniest part of an episode retold and know it was SpongeBob. Now it could be one of a multitude of shows with the same standard sense of humor. SpongeBob is no longer a unique show, just one in a crowd. 2005, the year SpongeBob jumped the shark.